Hello and welcome. As the day begins in the narrow streets of a medieval town, daily life unfolds in shared spaces where little goes unseen. Conversations are brief, gestures are small, and every interaction is shaped by watchful eyes. In this video, we explore what quiet, socially careful flirting could feel like in a world with almost no privacy. At first light, the interior of a medieval town home begins to stir before the sun has fully reached the narrow streets outside. The space is shared by several people, often spanning more than one generation. The air still holds the coolness of the night, mixed with the faint, lingering scent of smoke from last evening's hearth. Sleeping areas are not fully separate rooms in the modern sense. Instead, beds, pallets, and simple straw mattresses lie close together, arranged wherever space allows. Privacy is limited not by intention, but by the simple necessity of fitting many lives into a modest structure. Morning begins with quiet, practical movement. Someone rises first to rekindle the fire from embers that were banked the night before. Another person folds blankets or shakes out a wool cover near the doorway. Footsteps are soft on packed earth or worn wooden planks. Voices are kept low, not out of secrecy, but because the day is only just beginning and no one wishes to disturb those still waking. In such a setting, every person is aware of the presence of others at nearly all times. Within this shared environment, any awareness of attraction exists beneath multiple layers of routine. A young man or woman does not have a separate space to linger in private thought for long. The rhythm of the household moves steadily forward, and each person is expected to join it without delay. Tasks are assigned early. Water must be fetched from the well. Bread must be prepared or collected from the communal oven. Tools are checked before the day's labor begins. Family members observe one another without appearing to do so directly. Parents, older siblings, and relatives develop a quiet sensitivity to changes in behavior. A slightly longer pause before answering a question. A moment of distraction while tying a cord or fastening a sleeve. These small shifts do not go unnoticed, yet they are rarely addressed directly. Instead, they are absorbed into the steady awareness that defines life lived in close quarters. Clothing is simple, but chosen with care. Garments are practical and often worn many times before replacement becomes necessary. Even so, a ribbon tied a little more neatly than usual, or a belt adjusted with extra attention, can signal an inner intention without declaring it openly. These gestures remain subtle because drawing attention to oneself too strongly risks comment from others in the room. Morning light filters in through a small window or the open doorway. Dust motes drift in the pale beam. The sounds of the town begin to gather outside. A cartwheel turns somewhere in the distance. A rooster calls again, answered by another across the lane. The household prepares to join the wider movement of the town. Conversations at this hour are practical and grounded in necessity. Instructions are given, reminders are repeated. Someone asks who will pass by the baker's oven. Another mentions the need to deliver a finished item to a nearby workshop. Within these exchanges, tone carries more meaning than words alone. A voice that softens slightly when mentioning a certain route or errand can suggest a hoped-for encounter later in the morning. No one speaks openly about romantic interest in this shared space. The structure of the household does not encourage private emotional discussion, especially among the young. Instead, feelings are managed quietly. They are folded into posture, into the pace of movement, into where one chooses to stand while tying a shoe or adjusting a sleeve. Eye contact inside the home is brief and often indirect. If two young people live under the same roof or within neighboring families who share early morning routines, recognition is expressed through the smallest acknowledgements. A nod that lasts a fraction longer than usual. A momentary stillness when passing a tool from one hand to another. These gestures remain within the boundaries of acceptable behavior, easily explained as ordinary politeness, if observed by others. The presence of elders shapes the atmosphere throughout the morning. Older family members carry an expectation of modesty and composure. Their experience has taught them how quickly talk can spread through a close community. Because of this, they watch without appearing watchful. Their guidance is rarely delivered as a lecture in the morning. Instead, it exists as a steady, quiet standard that younger members understand without needing it spoken aloud. As the fire grows stronger, the room warms gradually. Simple food is shared, bread, perhaps a bit of porridge, something prepared the night before. Eating happens close together, with little separation between personal and communal space. Hands reach across the same table or board. The nearness reinforces the idea that individual desires must remain contained within the larger patterns of group life. Psychologically, this environment encourages careful self-control. A young person learns to hold expressions neutral, to keep gestures measured. Excitement or nervousness is softened before it becomes visible to others. The skill lies not in hiding emotion completely, but in allowing it to pass through the body without drawing unnecessary attention. Outside, footsteps begin to pass the doorway more frequently. Neighbours are already moving toward wells or workshops. The day's shared rhythm is forming. Inside, the final preparations are made. Cloaks are lifted from pegs. Belts are tightened. A parent may remind someone to return before dusk or to carry out an errand along a certain street. These instructions shape movement through the town in ways that also shape opportunities for interaction. Routes are rarely chosen freely. They are determined by duty and household need. Yet within those assigned paths, small choices remain. Walking slightly earlier or later, carrying an item that requires a stop at a particular place. None of these choices appear unusual on their own. Before leaving, individuals pause briefly at the threshold. Light from outside contrasts sharply with the dim interior. This moment is practical, adjusting to the brightness, listening to the street. But it also offers a quiet mental transition. Thoughts that could not be explored inside the crowded room settle into the background, ready to surface later in more public spaces where interaction is still visible, yet less confined by immediate family presence. As the household begins to step out one by one, the sense of constant observation does not disappear. It simply widens. Inside the home, attention came from family. Outside, it will come from neighbors and passers-by. The awareness of being seen remains steady, shaping posture and expression from the first steps into the street. The door closes or remains slightly open behind the last person leaving. Inside, the warmth of the hearth continues to fade into the background of the emptying room. Outside, the morning air carries the mixed scents of damp stone, wood smoke, and fresh bread from nearby ovens. The town is fully awake now, and the careful, unspoken management of attraction moves with each person into the shared spaces beyond the home. The streets are already active by the time the first household routines are complete. Morning light spreads slowly between the close-set buildings, touching upper walls before reaching the ground. The lanes are narrow, shaped by years of foot traffic and the steady passage of carts. Stone, packed earth, and worn timber create a surface that carries sound clearly. Footsteps, voices, and the creak of wood travel easily from one doorway to the next. People move with purpose at this hour. Water must be drawn before the queues grow longer. Bread must be collected while it is still warm from the communal oven. Workshop doors open to release the faint scent of sawdust, leather, or damp wool. Each task brings individuals into shared public view. No one stands idle for long without attracting attention or comment. At the town well, movement settles into a quiet rhythm. Buckets are lowered, ropes slide against stone, and water echoes softly as it is drawn up. Several households often arrive within the same short span of time. Conversations remain practical and brief. Names are spoken, but mostly in passing. Greetings are simple acknowledgements, rather than invitations to linger. Within this setting, recognition between familiar faces happens without ceremony or announcement. A glance across the circle of people waiting their turn may last only a moment. Eyes meet, then shift away in a manner that appears ordinary to anyone watching. The gesture is small enough to pass unnoticed by most, yet clear enough to confirm awareness between two individuals who have seen each other many times before. Body language carries much of the communication here. Posture remains composed and modest. Shoulders are kept relaxed, hands occupied with rope, bucket, or cloth. Standing too still or turning too directly toward one person could invite comment from neighbors. Instead, orientation is indirect. A slight turn of the body allows someone to remain within another's line of sight without appearing focused on them. The sounds of the morning create a steady backdrop that makes subtle gestures easier to conceal. A cart rattles past, drawing attention for a moment. Someone calls out to a neighbor across the lane. A child is instructed to carry a smaller pail. These ordinary interruptions provide natural breaks in observation. During these brief shifts, a second glance or a softened expression can pass without being marked as intentional. Near the bakery, the air is noticeably warmer. The scent of fresh bread moves into the street, and people gather in a loose line. Hands are busy with coins, cloth wraps, or small baskets. Exchanges with the baker are quick, shaped by the need to keep the line moving. Hands sometimes meet indirectly through the exchange of everyday objects. A loaf is passed from one person to another to make space. A dropped cloth is returned. Fingers do not linger. Contact is fleeting and easily justified by circumstance. Even so, such moments can remain in memory longer than the action itself, precisely because they are rare and unremarked upon. Around the workshops, Apprentices sweep thresholds or carry tools from storage. Masters stand nearby, observing both the work and the street. Their presence reinforces the expectation that time spent outside a home must appear purposeful. Pausing too long in one place risks being interpreted as idleness. Because of this, any attempt to remain within sight of a particular person is woven carefully into legitimate errands. Routes through the streets are shaped by necessity, yet small variations are possible. Choosing to pass by the well rather than the wider square, or timing a visit to the oven slightly earlier, can increase the chance of crossing paths again. These choices are subtle enough to seem accidental. The town's daily rhythm provides many such intersections where movement overlaps naturally. Facial expression remains measured. A slight lift at the corner of the mouth may signal recognition, but it fades quickly. Holding a smile too long could draw notice from others nearby. The discipline lies in allowing warmth to appear briefly, then returning to a composed neutrality that matches the general mood of the street. Neighbors observe without appearing to do so. People notice who arrives together, who lingers, who changes routine. This awareness is not always driven by suspicion. It is part of living in close quarters where everyone's schedule is visible. Because of this, individuals learn to keep interactions short and easily explained. The church bell may sound in the distance, marking the progression of the morning. Its tone carries over rooftops, and through the lanes the sound gently redistributes movement as some turn toward scheduled duties. This shared signal reduces the likelihood of extended conversation, reinforcing the brief nature of any exchange. Psychologically, these encounters create a quiet tension balanced by familiarity. There is comfort in seeing a known face within the crowd, yet also caution shaped by the knowledge that many eyes are present. Attention is divided between the task at hand and the subtle awareness of another person moving within the same space. As the sun climbs higher, the streets grow brighter and more crowded. Early errands give way to the fuller pace of the day. Those who came for water or bread begin to return to their households or continue toward workshops. The points of contact that existed a few moments earlier dissolve back into the general flow of movement. What remains is a sense of having acknowledged another presence without interrupting the order of the morning. No promises are spoken, no plans are formed aloud. The connection is maintained through repetition and recognition, rather than declaration. Within the shared spaces of the town, this careful pattern allows interest to exist without challenging the expectations that guide public behavior. By the time the morning is fully established, the tone of the town is shaped less by individual intention and more by the steady framework of expectation that surrounds daily life. Behavior in public is not guided only by habit. It is also directed by a shared understanding of what is considered proper within the community. These expectations are rarely written down, yet they are widely known and quietly enforced through repeated observation and comment. Family authority forms the first layer of this structure. Households carry responsibility not only for their own work, but also for their standing within the town. A family's reputation influences trade, cooperation, and future arrangements. Because of this, younger members are taught early to move with restraint, to speak carefully, and to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Instruction is often indirect. A parent may correct posture with a light touch, or remind someone to keep their voice steady in public. This guidance continues even when family members are not physically present. The awareness of representing one's household travels with each person into the street. Actions are measured against an internalized sense of how they might be described later by a neighbor. This quiet self-monitoring becomes habitual, shaping how long someone allows their gaze to rest on another face, or how close they choose to stand during conversation. The church contributes another steady influence. Its presence is both physical and social. The building itself occupies a central place in the town, and its schedule marks the progression of the day. Sermons and teachings emphasize modesty, patience, and the value of orderly conduct. These messages do not address individual relationships in detail each day, yet they create a general climate that favors restraint and clear intention over impulsive behavior. Religious observance also creates shared moments of stillness. When people gather or pass near the churchyard, voices lower naturally. Movement becomes more measured. In such spaces, overt displays of personal interest would feel out of place. As a result, any recognition between two individuals is expressed through the smallest acceptable signs, such as a respectful nod or a brief exchange of neutral words. Guild expectations add a practical dimension to social conduct. Workshops depend on trust, reliability, and cooperation. Masters are attentive to how apprentices and workers behave beyond the workbench, because reputation affects business relationships. A young person known for distraction or gossip may be seen as less dependable. Because of this, individuals learn to keep personal concerns separate from visible duty. Clothing and presentation are also shaped by these layered expectations. Garments reflect occupation, status, and family means. Keeping clothing tidy signals discipline and respect for the community's standards. Adjusting a sleeve or smoothing a tunic before stepping into a busy street is not merely a matter of appearance. It is a way of aligning oneself with the shared idea of proper conduct. Within this careful presentation, any attempt to appear slightly more attentive, such as ensuring a belt is straight or a ribbon sits neatly, must remain subtle enough to avoid comment. Conversation in public follows predictable patterns. Greetings are brief. Questions focus on work, weather, or shared responsibilities. Speaking too softly with only one person, or allowing laughter to linger in a private tone, can draw notice from those nearby. For this reason, individuals keep their voices at a level that blends with the surrounding sound. Even when addressing someone of particular interest, the words remain practical. Reputation moves through the town by quiet repetition. A single moment rarely defines how a person is seen. Instead, impressions form through many small observations over time. Someone who consistently behaves with modesty and steadiness earns a kind of social trust. This trust creates limited space for slightly warmer acknowledgement without causing concern. Without that foundation, even a harmless gesture might be interpreted as carelessness. Neighbours contribute to this network of observation simply by living close together. Windows open toward the same lanes. Doorways face one another across narrow passages. People pause to speak while carrying out routine tasks. These ordinary habits create a continuous flow of information. Most of it is harmless and practical, yet it reinforces the idea that little remains entirely unseen. Psychologically, this environment encourages patience. Feelings cannot be acted upon quickly without risking misunderstanding. Instead, interest is expressed through consistency, appearing at similar times, maintaining composed behavior, and offering small courtesies build a gradual sense of familiarity that others can observe without concern. The slow pace protects both individuals from sudden judgment. Emotional restraint becomes a skill learned through daily repetition, a quickening of attention when a certain person enters the same space is acknowledged internally, then softened before it reaches the face. Breathing steadies. Hands remain occupied. The outward appearance stays aligned with the calm tone expected in shared settings. Over time, this controlled response feels natural rather than forced. Community expectations also define what is considered respectful distance. Standing too near without clear reason can be misread. Remaining slightly apart signals awareness of boundaries. When conversation occurs, it often includes more than two people, creating a buffer that keeps interaction within accepted norms. Within such small groups, a brief exchange can pass without drawing special notice. Cause and effect within this system is clear and widely understood. Careful behavior supports a stable reputation. A stable reputation allows continued participation in shared spaces without scrutiny. This, in turn, makes it possible for quiet familiarity to grow between individuals under the watch of the community. Each part reinforces the others, creating a self-sustaining pattern. As the morning continues and the town settles into its working rhythm, these expectations remain present but unobtrusive. They do not feel like constant pressure in every moment. Instead, they function as a steady background, much like the distant sound of tools or the regular tolling of a bell. Within that steady framework, subtle recognition and measured interaction can exist without disrupting the order of daily life. The physical design of the town itself reinforces these social patterns in ways that are easy to overlook but constantly present. Streets are not wide enough for large gatherings to form spontaneously. Instead, they channel movement into predictable flows that keep people visible to one another. Corners and intersections create natural pauses where individuals must slow their pace, providing brief moments when faces can be recognized without any appearance of deliberate lingering. Buildings lean close together, their upper floors extending over the street below. This creates a sense of enclosure that limits how far one can see ahead. It also means that sound carries easily between windows and doorways. A conversation held too quietly in one spot might draw attention simply because it contrasts with the general noise of the street. This acoustic reality shapes how people speak in public, encouraging a tone that is neither too soft nor too loud. The well, the market square, and the church entrance serve as anchors for daily movement. Nearly everyone passes through these spaces at some point during the morning. Because of this, they become reliable points where paths cross naturally. The predictability of these crossings allows for recognition without the need for deliberate planning. Simply following the expected routine increases the likelihood of encountering familiar faces. Doorways and thresholds create another layer of visibility. Many homes open directly onto the street with no separation. People stepping out become immediately visible to anyone passing by. This means that leaving one's home is already a form of public appearance. The transition from private to public space happens in a single step, requiring an immediate shift in posture and expression. Workshop entrances function similarly. Apprentices and workers move in and out throughout the day, visible to neighbors and passers-by. The open structure of many workshops means that activity inside can be partially observed from the street. This transparency reinforces accountability and discourages behavior that might seem secretive or out of place. The rhythm of the day is also shaped by shared resources. The communal oven draws people at predictable times. The well must be visited regularly. These necessities create a schedule that many households follow in a similar pattern. This overlap is not accidental. It reflects the practical realities of medieval town life, but it also creates opportunities for repeated, predictable encounters. Light changes the character of the streets as the morning progresses. Early in the day, shadows are long and movement is softer. As the sun rises higher, the light becomes more even and details become clearer. This shift affects how people are seen. In brighter light, facial expressions are more visible. Posture is easier to read. The increased visibility encourages even greater care in maintaining composed behavior. Weather also plays a role. On rainy days, movement through the streets is faster and more focused. People hurry to complete tasks and return indoors. Conversations are briefer. On clear days, the pace slows slightly. People may pause longer at the well or near the market. These variations in rhythm create different conditions for interaction, though the underlying expectations remain the same. Seasonal changes bring their own patterns. In colder months, people are more bundled, and outdoor time is reduced. In warmer months, more activity spills into the street. Windows stay open longer. People linger outside doorways. These shifts alter the balance between visibility and privacy, but they do not remove the fundamental awareness that behavior is being observed. Children move through the streets with less restraint than adults, yet even they are watched by their elders. Their presence adds another layer to the network of observation. A child who notices something unusual is likely to mention it at home. This casual reporting reinforces the idea that nothing in the shared spaces of the town goes entirely unnoticed. Dogs and other animals also contribute to the atmosphere. A dog barking draws attention. A cart horse stopping unexpectedly creates a pause in movement. These small disruptions shift where people look and how long they remain in one spot. They are part of the unpredictable elements that individuals must navigate while maintaining composed behavior. The physical effort required by daily tasks also shapes interaction. Carrying water, hauling wood, or transporting goods requires focus and energy. This practical demand helps justify brief exchanges. A person who stops to adjust a heavy load has a clear reason for pausing. If a brief word is exchanged during that moment, it fits naturally into the rhythm of work. Touch, when it occurs, is mediated by objects. Handing over a bucket, passing a tool, or helping to lift a sack all involve brief functional contact. These moments are socially acceptable because they serve a clear purpose. Yet they also provide rare instances of physical proximity that can carry additional meaning for those involved, even as they appear entirely ordinary to onlookers. Seating in public spaces is limited. There are few benches or places to rest outside of private homes. This encourages continuous movement and discourages prolonged stationary interaction. People who pause do so standing, which keeps the body in a state of readiness to continue walking. This physical posture reinforces the idea that public space is for transit and task completion, not for extended personal conversation. The smell of the streets, smoke, animals, food, damp stone creates a sensory environment that is constantly present. It is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, simply familiar. This backdrop of scent becomes associated with the daily routine and with the people encountered during it. Over time, these sensory memories contribute to the sense of familiarity that develops between individuals who share the same spaces day after day. As the morning continues, the town settles into a rhythm that feels both structured and organic. The physical layout, the shared schedule, and the layered expectations all work together to create an environment where subtle recognition and quiet familiarity can grow. Within this framework, individuals navigate their own desires and interests with care, always mindful of the many eyes that watch, the many ears that listen, and the steady social order that shapes every step taken in the shared life of the town. By mid-morning, the town has settled into a steady rhythm of work, and the shared spaces begin to fill in ways that can be predicted. The main market area draws people in from nearby lanes, while narrower streets carry a slower but continuous flow of movement between workshops, storage rooms, and the small courtyards attached to households. The light is stronger now, reaching deeper into passages that were shadowed earlier in the day. With this greater visibility comes a clearer sense of who is present and how often different paths happen to cross. The market does not operate as a single loud gathering, but rather as a series of small overlapping circles of activity. Stalls are positioned close together along the available space. Tables hold bread, vegetables, lengths of cloth, simple tools, and various small household items. Sellers speak in measured tones, repeating the same short phrases to each person who passes by. Buyers pause briefly, examine the goods before them, and then move on. The repetition creates a calm, almost rhythmic atmosphere, where presence remains constant but is rarely intense. Within this environment, familiarity begins to grow through repeated ordinary encounters. Seeing the same person pause at a neighboring stall on consecutive days becomes part of the expected background pattern. Recognition no longer requires deliberate searching or conscious effort. It happens automatically as the eye adjusts to the movement that surrounds it. a face becomes one of the anticipated elements of the space, much like the shape of a familiar doorway, or the sound of a particular vendor's voice calling out their wares. Narrow lanes leading into the market naturally encourage slow movement. Two people cannot easily pass one another without adjusting their steps or shifting their shoulders. This natural constraint creates brief moments of shared pace. Walking side by side for a few seconds, then separating again as the path widens, appears entirely practical and unremarkable. Yet these short intervals allow awareness to settle between individuals without drawing any particular attention. No one needs to stop completely or turn directly toward another person to achieve this recognition. Body orientation plays an important role in these quiet exchanges. Turning slightly to allow someone to pass, or pausing for half a step to avoid brushing shoulders, provides opportunities for acknowledgement that remain subtle. A small incline of the head or a softened expression can be exchanged within the motion itself. Because the gesture is embedded in movement that is already necessary, it remains socially acceptable and is easily overlooked by others who might be watching. Sound in the market is layered but remains steady throughout the morning. Wooden crates shift against stone surfaces. Cloth rustles as it is unfolded and then refolded for display. Coins touch palm and then table with a faint metallic sound. Voices rise and fall without sharp peaks or sudden volume. This consistent background makes subtle communication easier to conceal within the general activity. A brief change in tone or a slightly warmer greeting blends seamlessly into the general murmur of trade and conversation. Churchyards nearby often function as transitional spaces between the busier streets. People cross through them on the way to other tasks, slowing their pace out of long-standing habit. The open area allows for clearer sightlines across the space. Yet the expected quiet encourages restrained behavior from everyone who enters. Passing through at similar times each day creates another point where repeated recognition can occur without any need for deliberate planning or arrangement. In these shared spaces, routine itself provides a kind of invisible structure for interaction. A person who regularly delivers goods, collects supplies, or carries messages will naturally appear along certain routes at predictable times. Others learn these patterns without needing them explained or stated outright. Over time, crossing paths with the same individual feels less like coincidence and more like a stable feature of the day's familiar rhythm. Conversation remains grounded in practical matters whenever it occurs. A short remark about the freshness of produce or the timing of a delivery is sufficient to acknowledge another person's presence. Words are chosen carefully so they can be heard by anyone standing nearby without causing concern or suspicion. The meaning is carried as much by the consistency of these exchanges as by their actual content. Hearing the same calm voice exchange similar phrases over the course of several mornings creates a quiet sense of familiarity that does not need to be named. Hands remain occupied with tasks throughout these moments, which helps maintain the appearance of purpose and utility. Holding a basket, adjusting a cloth wrap around the shoulders, or checking the weight of a purchase provides a natural reason to pause for a moment. During these pauses, a glance can be exchanged without appearing intentional or deliberate. Once the task is complete, movement resumes naturally, preserving the overall flow of the crowd and preventing any single interaction from standing out. Community observation continues throughout the day, though it often feels diffuse rather than sharply focused. Many people see many small actions unfolding around them, but few watch any single interaction closely unless something unusual or unexpected occurs. This broad shared awareness encourages individuals to keep their gestures modest and contained. The safest expressions are those that can be interpreted easily as ordinary courtesy or simple politeness. Psychologically, repeated encounters in such spaces create a gradual easing of the tension that might have been present at first. The first few moments of recognition may carry a quiet alertness or a heightened awareness, but familiarity softens that response over time. The presence of the other person becomes expected rather than surprising. Even so, caution remains ever present. The knowledge that anyone nearby might notice a change in behavior keeps movements measured and expressions brief. Time in the market moves through recognizable cycles. A brief increase in activity occurs as new arrivals enter the space, followed by a calmer period as some depart to continue their errands elsewhere. These shifts create natural beginnings and endings to encounters without requiring any deliberate action. If two people happen to stand near the same stall for a time, the moment concludes easily when one is called forward to make a purchase or steps aside to make room for another buyer. No explanation or excuse is needed for the separation. Light reflects off pale stone and worn wood throughout the market, giving the entire space a muted brightness. Shadows fall sharply beneath awnings and covered stalls, but soften considerably in the open areas between them. Faces are visible in this light, yet smaller details fade as people move in and out of shade. This visual texture allows recognition to occur without requiring prolonged focus on any one individual. A familiar outline or a recognizable posture is often enough to identify someone without the need for direct eye contact. As the morning progresses steadily toward midday, the density of movement within the space changes once again. Some individuals return to workshops with their purchases in hand. Others arrive fresh from the outer streets, just beginning their errands. The continuous flow of people ensures that no single meeting stands apart from all the rest. Each brief acknowledgement is absorbed into the larger pattern of daily life, becoming part of the ordinary rhythm, rather than an exceptional moment. Through this steady repetition across days and weeks, familiarity develops without ever requiring declaration or announcement. Interest is sustained not by intensity, but by consistency, by the reliable return to the same places at similar times. The shared spaces of the town provide enough regular contact to maintain recognition between individuals, yet they also contain enough activity and movement to keep every exchange safely within the boundaries of ordinary routine. The rhythm of movement, sound and shifting light supports a form of interaction that is present, visible to those involved, and yet carefully restrained as the day continues to move forward. As the day continues and the pace of work settles into its steady middle hours, communication becomes increasingly dependent on small indirect methods that fit easily within the pattern of routine tasks. The town's shared spaces remain active with ongoing labour, yet the intensity of early morning errands has softened into a more measured flow. People are now engaged in sustained work, sorting goods, repairing tools, preparing materials for later use, or carrying items between familiar points along well-travelled routes. Within this environment, any expression of personal interest must remain carefully woven into practical movement that appears entirely ordinary. Glances are among the most common forms of quiet acknowledgement in these settings. They are brief and timed carefully to coincide with natural pauses in the work. When lifting a bundle onto a table or turning after setting down a bucket, the eyes may rise for a moment and meet another's gaze before returning to the task at hand. The action appears unplanned because it follows naturally from the rhythm of ongoing work. Holding the gaze for any length of time would be immediately noticeable, so it is released quickly, leaving only a faint trace of recognition behind. Posture also carries meaning without requiring any words to be spoken. Standing with a slightly more open orientation when someone approaches signals awareness while still appearing neutral to outside observers. Shoulders remain relaxed rather than tense. Hands continue their work without interruption, and the body does not turn fully toward the other person. This partial alignment allows presence to be acknowledged without creating the impression of actively seeking private attention or conversation. Tone of voice becomes another subtle channel for communication. In shared spaces, most speech remains practical and directed clearly toward the tasks being performed. Yet the cadence can shift slightly when addressing a familiar person. A greeting may be delivered with a softer edge than usual, or a simple phrase may be spoken with clearer articulation. The words themselves remain ordinary and unremarkable, but the manner of speaking conveys a degree of attentiveness that is gentle enough to pass unnoticed within the general murmur of conversation and activity. Passing objects from one person to another provides one of the few acceptable reasons for brief physical proximity. A length of cloth may be handed across a table to be examined. A small tool may be returned after being borrowed for temporary use. A basket might be steadied as it is lifted from the ground or set down. Hands approach one another, complete the transfer with practiced efficiency, and then separate without lingering. The contact is entirely functional, explained fully by the task at hand, yet it creates a moment of shared focus that can be remembered and carried forward long after the interaction has passed. Small favours emerge naturally from the pattern of cooperative work that defines the town's daily rhythm. Holding a door open while someone carries a heavy item through, shifting a crate to clear a narrow path, or pointing out a misplaced tool are all gestures that fit comfortably within the expectations of helpful behaviour. Offering such assistance does not attract suspicion because it clearly benefits the group as a whole. over time, repeated helpfulness directed toward the same person becomes a quiet signal of regard that remains entirely socially acceptable and unremarkable to observers. Timing plays an important role in making these indirect exchanges possible. Choosing to complete a particular task at a moment when another person is likely to pass nearby allows interaction to occur without any visible arrangement. The action appears guided entirely by practical necessity rather than personal intention. If the timing does not align on a given day, no adjustment is made that would draw notice from others. Patience preserves the appearance of ordinary routine and prevents any suggestion of deliberate coordination. Facial expression is carefully moderated throughout these interactions. A slight softening around the eyes or a brief easing of the mouth can communicate warmth without forming a clear smile that might be noticed. Expressions return quickly to a neutral state that matches the general tone of the workspace and the demeanor of those around them. This controlled shift allows emotion to surface momentarily while maintaining the composure expected in shared labor. The surrounding sensory environment provides support for these restrained signals. The steady sounds of tools striking wood, footsteps crossing stone, and low conversation create a continuous backdrop of familiar noise. Because many small sounds overlap and blend together, a brief change in voice or a quiet exchange between two people does not stand out from the general pattern. The scent of wood shavings, stored grain, or damp stone remains constant throughout the space, reinforcing the sense that nothing unusual is occurring in any particular corner. Community members working nearby remain generally aware of their surroundings, but are not focused intently on any single interaction. Most attention is directed toward completing their own duties and maintaining the steady pace of their work. This diffuse observation allows modest gestures to pass without drawing comment, as long as they remain consistent with practical needs and the expectations of helpful cooperation. Anything that appears unnecessary or prolonged would inevitably shift attention. So individuals keep their movements efficient and their interactions brief. Psychologically, these indirect methods allow feelings to be acknowledged without incurring the risk that would accompany direct speech or obvious displays of interest. The mind learns gradually to read meaning in small variations: how quickly an object is offered, how carefully it is received, how often assistance is provided to the same person. Each detail is minor when considered on its own, yet together they form a quiet pattern that both individuals involved can recognize and understand without needing explanation. Emotional restraint continues to guide behavior even as recognition becomes more familiar over time. There is no visible escalation in the intensity of these exchanges. The same brief glance, the same measured tone, the same practical exchange of objects or words repeats across days and weeks. This repetition creates a sense of stability and predictability. It prevents any single moment from appearing significant enough to invite comment or closer observation from others in the vicinity. Cause and effect remains clear within the established social structure. Because gestures remain useful and modest in scale, they are interpreted by observers as simple courtesy rather than personal display or private communication. Courtesy is actively encouraged within communal work settings, so it provides a safe and acceptable channel for continued interaction. The boundary between general kindness and specific attention remains intact and undisturbed. Light during the middle of the day is more direct than it was in the early morning, reducing the cover that shadows provided in narrow lanes and beneath overhangs. Faces are easier to read in this brighter illumination, which increases the need for controlled expression and careful management of visible emotion. Individuals respond to this by keeping their focus firmly on visible tasks, aligning items carefully on a table, checking the condition of materials, adjusting tools to improve their function, so that any brief glance appears entirely incidental rather than purposeful. As the hours pass and work continues without interruption, these small exchanges accumulate into a quiet familiarity that is grounded firmly in shared effort. No statement is made between the individuals involved, no promise is suggested or implied. Instead, recognition is maintained steadily through consistency in posture, tone, timing, and helpful action repeated over time. The town's steady rhythm of labour and movement absorbs each modest gesture, allowing interest to exist as part of ordinary cooperation rather than something separate from it or set apart. As the day advances further into the afternoon, the sense of being quietly observed becomes more noticeable. Not because anyone is watching with deliberate intent, but because so many lives unfold within the same narrow boundaries and overlapping spaces. Homes, workshops and small courtyards sit close together along the lanes. Windows remain open whenever weather permits. Doorways frame constant movement in and out as people come and go throughout their tasks. In such an environment, awareness spreads naturally from person to person without needing any formal system of oversight or organized surveillance. Neighbors recognize familiar routines with considerable ease. They know who usually passes at certain hours, who carries which particular tools, and who tends to pause to exchange brief words along the way. This knowledge is not collected deliberately through conscious effort. Instead, it forms gradually through repeated exposure, much the way one becomes accustomed to the regular sound of a nearby hammer striking an anvil, or the daily creak of a particular cart moving along its route. Because these patterns are so well known and deeply established, any visible change or deviation from the expected routine stands out more quickly than it otherwise might. Relatives often live within a short distance of one another, sometimes along the same lane or sharing a common courtyard. Their presence extends the influence of the household beyond its immediate walls. A cousin might be working at a nearby stall in the market. An older sibling could be assisting in another workshop just a few doors away. Even without any direct interaction occurring, the possibility of being recognized by family shapes how a person carries themselves when moving through public spaces. Posture remains composed and upright, gestures remain brief and purposeful, and conversations stay grounded in practical matters rather than straying into personal territory. Apprentices and fellow workers also contribute significantly to this quiet network of observation. Shared labour requires steady cooperation, and cooperation depends fundamentally on trust built over time. People notice who arrives on time each morning, who completes their tasks steadily without distraction, and who becomes visibly inattentive or idle. These observations are usually neutral in nature, yet they reinforce a broader culture where attention is paid consistently to the quality of work and the reliability of individuals. Someone who lingers too long in conversation or appears distracted risks being perceived as inattentive to their assigned duties. The physical layout of the town actively encourages this collective awareness. Narrow passages channel movement along predictable routes so that individuals pass within close range of one another repeatedly throughout the day. Small open areas, such as the spaces around wells or shared yards, act as natural gathering points where multiple paths converge. From these positions, it becomes easy to see who approaches from different directions, who leaves after completing their business, and how long someone remains in any given spot. No single person controls this view or holds authority over it. The visibility exists simply because the available space is limited and must be shared by many. Voices carry clearly between buildings, especially when windows are open and doors stand ajar. Even when individual words cannot be distinguished from a distance, tone and duration can be heard and noted. A conversation that continues longer than what is typical for a brief exchange may draw a passing glance from someone working nearby. Because of this acoustic transparency, people make an effort to keep their exchanges concise. When speaking, they often angle their bodies slightly toward ongoing tasks, sorting goods, tying cords, adjusting loads on a table, so that their attention appears divided between the conversation and their work, rather than fixed entirely on one individual. Small signs of informal supervision appear naturally in everyday gestures. An older neighbor might pause briefly while sweeping a threshold, not necessarily to listen intentionally, but simply because their movement has slowed for a moment. A workshop master may look up from his workbench as someone passes by the open door, acknowledging their presence with a brief nod. These actions are entirely routine and expected, yet they serve as gentle reminders that shared space rarely allows for complete privacy or unobserved activity. Psychologically, this constant but gentle visibility encourages a form of self-regulation among individuals. People learn to anticipate how their actions might appear when viewed from several different angles at once. A glance that lingers is shortened before it becomes noticeable to someone watching from the side. A step taken closer to another person is balanced immediately by a return to neutral distance. The mind maintains a steady awareness of the surrounding environment while still focusing on the immediate task, splitting attention between internal intention and external appearance. Gossip exists as a possibility rather than as a constant reality in daily life. Most conversation among neighbors concerns straightforward practical matters: prices at the market, changes in weather, expected deliveries, the health of family members. Even so, stories about unusual behavior can travel quickly through the community when they do arise. The knowledge that talk can spread with surprising speed encourages people to keep their conduct well within the accepted norms of behavior. Restraint becomes a form of protection, both for personal standing in the community and for the reputation of the family as a whole. Community observation is not always restrictive or limiting in nature. It can also provide a reassuring sense of shared order and mutual accountability. Knowing that others are present and attentive to their surroundings creates a degree of predictability in daily life. People come to expect courtesy, measured speech, and purposeful movement from those around them. When these expectations are consistently met, the environment feels stable and orderly. Within that established stability, subtle recognition between two individuals can continue quietly without causing any disruption to the broader social fabric. Eye contact in such settings is managed with considerable care. A brief meeting of the eyes may occur naturally when passing in a narrow lane or when standing near the same workspace. The gaze shifts away after a moment, often redirecting toward an object that requires adjustment or a task that needs attention. This sequence, acknowledge briefly, then redirect focus elsewhere, signals awareness while simultaneously demonstrating respect for public boundaries and the expectations of restrained behavior. Hands remain occupied as much as possible throughout the day, carrying items from one place to another, straightening materials that have become disarranged, or wiping a surface clean provides visible proof of ongoing purpose. Purpose itself reduces scrutiny from others. When movement is clearly tied to necessary work, observers have little reason to question it or examine it more closely. This practical focus allows small gestures, returning an item that was borrowed, pointing out a misplaced tool, offering brief assistance, to pass as simple cooperation that benefits everyone. Light during the later part of the day begins to soften slightly as the sun shifts position, though activity in the streets and workshops remains steady. Shadows lengthen gradually along the base of walls and across open courtyards. The changing angle of the sun draws more attention to movement across open spaces, making posture and gait more noticeable from a distance. In response to this increased visibility, individuals maintain even unhurried steps that match the general pace of movement along the street, avoiding anything that might appear rushed or furtive. Cause and effect within this environment operates in subtle but consistent ways. Because everyone is aware of being seen by others throughout the day, behavior remains moderate and carefully measured. Because behavior remains moderate across the community, fewer disruptions occur to disturb the established rhythm of daily life. This shared moderation allows everyday interactions, including the quiet signs of familiarity exchanged between two individuals, to exist without inviting particular concern or closer inspection from those around them. Emotion is managed internally with steady discipline. A moment of recognition may bring a brief lift in attention or a quiet surge of feeling, followed immediately by a deliberate return to neutral expression. Breathing steadies, shoulders remain relaxed rather than tensing, and the rhythm of work continues without visible interruption. Over time, this pattern of acknowledgement, followed by restraint, becomes habitual, reducing the mental strain that might otherwise come from constant watchfulness and the need to monitor one's own reactions continuously. As the afternoon progresses without incident, The network of quiet observation remains firmly in place, neither tightening into active surveillance nor fading into complete inattention. It functions as a steady background presence, much like the distant sound of tools being used in nearby workshops or the regular passing of footsteps along familiar routes. Within that calm, visible order maintained by the community as a whole, restrained interaction can continue day after day. Noticed in passing by some, interpreted by most as ordinary courtesy and cooperation, and absorbed smoothly into the shared life of the town without causing disturbance or drawing unwanted attention. As the afternoon settles into its later hours, the pace of work remains steady, but it begins to allow brief moments when people move between tasks rather than staying fixed in one place. These transitions create small windows where interaction can occur without appearing intentional. The town's shared routines provide clear boundaries for what is considered acceptable. Within those limits, certain forms of brief companionship are tolerated as part of ordinary cooperation. Walking short distances together is one of the most common of these forms. When two people happen to be heading toward the same well, storage room, or side street, it becomes natural to fall into a similar pace for a few steps. The movement is guided by the layout of the town rather than by personal choice. Narrow paths encourage alignment, and the need to reach the same destination explains the shared route. Conversation, if it occurs at all, stays focused on the task ahead. These shared walks are typically brief. The path may divide after only a few turns, or one person may pause to enter a doorway while the other continues forward. Because the separation is expected, no special closing words are needed. A simple nod or a quiet acknowledgement is enough. The interaction remains contained within the practical purpose that brought both individuals along the same way. Group settings provide another acceptable space for limited exchange. Carrying goods often requires more than one set of hands. Several people may lift a crate together, roll a barrel, or sort items on a long table. Within these small groups, a few words can be shared without drawing attention to any single pair. The presence of others acts as a buffer, keeping the tone neutral and the focus on shared effort. Speech in these moments remains measured and functional. Instructions are short and clear. Someone may suggest adjusting grip or shifting position. A brief remark about weight or balance fits naturally into the activity. Even when voices soften slightly, the practical context keeps the exchange within accepted boundaries. No one appears to be speaking for reasons that go beyond the work itself. Body language continues to carry subtle meaning throughout these interactions. Standing with a slight openness when another person joins the group signals readiness to cooperate. Passing an item with steady hands and a calm pace reflects reliability. These qualities are valued in communal labor, so they attract approval rather than suspicion. Over time, repeated cooperation builds quiet familiarity that others interpret simply as trust between workers. Shared tasks also create moments of synchronized movement. Two people lifting the same object must match their timing. Steps align, hands adjust together, and attention focuses on maintaining balance. This coordination is entirely practical, yet it produces a brief sense of connection, grounded in mutual awareness. Once the task is complete, each person returns to their separate duties without lingering. The physical environment shapes how long these interactions last. Tight spaces require efficiency. Doorways cannot remain blocked, and narrow lanes must stay clear for others passing through. Because of this, pauses are kept short. Even when there is no immediate urgency, the habit of keeping pathways open encourages quick transitions back to individual work. Community observation remains present but relaxed during these cooperative moments. Seeing people assist one another is expected and often appreciated. Neighbors recognize that shared labor keeps daily life running smoothly. As long as behavior stays modest and purposeful, there is little reason for anyone to look more closely. The interaction blends into the broader pattern of the afternoon's activity. Psychologically, these acceptable forms of brief companionship allow individuals to experience familiarity without stepping outside social norms. The mind registers the repeated presence of the same person within group tasks. Comfort grows from predictability rather than from private exchange. This slow accumulation of shared moments feels stable and safe within the structure of the community. Emotional expression remains restrained throughout. A slight easing of tension in the shoulders or a calmer rhythm of breathing may occur when working alongside a familiar presence. These internal shifts do not need to appear outwardly. The visible focus stays on completing the task efficiently and returning tools or materials to their proper place. Cause and effect continues to guide behavior in these settings. Because cooperation is valued, participating reliably in shared work strengthens one's reputation. A stronger reputation allows future interactions to occur without question. This cycle supports continued and modest proximity that does not invite comment. Each practical exchange reinforces the sense that the connection is rooted in duty rather than in personal display. The sensory atmosphere of the late afternoon carries a quieter tone than earlier hours. Sunlight softens and stretches across walls and ground. The sound of heavy work lessens as some tasks conclude. Lighter activities, such as sorting, cleaning, and organizing, become more common. In this calmer setting, voices are easier to hear, which encourages even more careful moderation of speech. As people begin to move tools back into storage or carry finished goods toward their next destination, short shared routes appear again. Two individuals may walk the same stretch before turning toward different courtyards. The separation happens naturally, marked by a simple acknowledgement that requires no explanation. Each returns to their responsibilities with the same composed demeanor. Through these repeated and acceptable interactions, walking briefly together, speaking within a group, coordinating shared effort, familiarity continues to grow without crossing the boundaries set by the community. The rhythm of cooperation provides a steady framework where recognition can exist quietly, supported by routine and contained within the visible order of the town as the day moves gradually toward evening. As the afternoon leans toward its later stretch, the tone of the town carries a subtle weight that is less visible than the activity surrounding it. Work continues, voices remain measured, and movement stays purposeful. Yet, beneath these steady routines lies an ongoing awareness of how easily talk can travel from one doorway to another. This awareness does not create constant tension, but it encourages a careful moderation of behavior that has been learned over many years. Gossip is rarely loud or confrontational. It moves quietly, carried in ordinary conversation, while hands remain busy with daily tasks. A remark about who was seen lingering near a stall or who changed their usual route may be shared without strong emotion. Because the town is small and patterns are familiar, even minor deviations can become topics of casual notice. Most of the time, these observations fade quickly, but the possibility that they might persist is enough to shape how people present themselves. Family honor is closely tied to this quiet flow of information. A household's standing affects trade, cooperation, and the willingness of others to offer help during difficult seasons. For this reason, individuals learn to protect not only their own reputation, but also that of those they live with. Actions in public are weighed against how they might reflect back on parents, siblings, or relatives working nearby. This shared responsibility encourages restraint that feels collective rather than purely personal. In practical terms, this means gestures remain small and easily explained. A glance is brief. A conversation ends before it appears private. Standing too close without a clear task is avoided. These choices are rarely discussed aloud. They are understood through repeated example, reinforced by the calm approval given to those who behave with steady composure. Neighbors contribute to this atmosphere simply by continuing their routines. Someone sweeping a threshold may notice who passes more than once. A vendor arranging goods might observe who returns at similar times each day. These observations are usually neutral, yet they create a sense that patterns are visible to many eyes. Because of this, individuals prefer consistency over sudden change. Emotional restraint becomes especially important during these hours, when fatigue from the day's labor can lower concentration. A tired mind might allow attention to linger longer than intended. To prevent this, people rely on habit. Hands remain occupied with sorting, folding, or cleaning. The body maintains a steady pace that leaves little room for hesitation. Routine acts as a guide that keeps behavior aligned with expectations, even when energy begins to fade. The Church's earlier teachings about patience and modest conduct echo quietly in memory. They do not appear as active instruction in every moment, but they shape the internal standard against which actions are measured. Choosing to keep a neutral expression or to end a conversation promptly feels less like suppression and more like adherence to a familiar rhythm of proper behavior. Light during this part of the day softens further, casting longer shadows across stone and packed earth. The change in atmosphere encourages a gradual slowing of movement. With fewer urgent tasks remaining, small pauses occur more often. These pauses carry a risk of appearing idle, so individuals fill them with simple and visible actions, adjusting tools, stacking materials, or checking the condition of supplies keeps purpose visible even when work is nearly complete. Psychologically, the steady presence of social pressure encourages patience in the development of any personal connection. There is an understanding that trust within the community forms over time and can be weakened by careless display. Because of this, interest is expressed through consistency rather than intensity. Showing the same calm courtesy across many days is safer than any single noticeable gesture. Cause and effect within the town's social fabric is widely recognized. Careful conduct reduces the chance of talk. Reduced talk preserves a family's good standing. A good standing allows continued freedom to move through shared spaces without scrutiny. This chain of outcomes is simple and well understood, guiding behavior even when no one is actively reminding others of it. Group settings remain the preferred context for any exchange. When several people are present, attention is distributed. Words spoken in a neutral tone blend into the general conversation. If one person steps away, the interaction ends naturally. This structure protects individuals from the appearance of secrecy, which is often the spark that sustains rumor. Facial expressions stay composed, especially as people begin to feel the pull of evening. A brief softening of the eyes or a quiet acknowledgement may occur, then fade back into neutrality. The discipline of returning to a calm expression becomes almost automatic, shaped by years of living within visible community life. The sensory environment reflects this gradual easing of the day. The louder sounds of heavy labor diminish. Lighter noises become more prominent. Brooms brushing against stone, the closing of wooden shutters, the low murmur of final exchanges. These gentler sounds support a slower pace that still remains orderly and public. As tasks conclude and tools are returned to their places, individuals prepare to leave shared work areas. Departures happen in small clusters rather than all at once. A few final words about the next day's duties are exchanged. Any recognition between familiar faces remains contained within these practical goodbyes, expressed through a nod or a steady and respectful tone. Through this constant and quiet pressure, rooted in the possibility of gossip, the value of family honor, and the visibility of daily life, behavior stays measured. Interest does not disappear, but it is carried forward with patience and care. The community's expectations act like a steady current beneath the surface of the town's routine, guiding each person to move calmly, speak briefly, and allow familiarity to continue only within the safe boundaries of shared and respectable conduct. As evening approaches, the light over the town softens into a muted glow that settles along rooftops and the upper edges of the streets. The pace of movement changes without any formal signal. Tasks that required strength and steady repetition begin to conclude, and people shift toward lighter duties. Covering goods, sweeping thresholds, stacking tools in their usual places. These become the focus. The air carries a quieter tone, shaped by the gradual reduction of heavy work. Communal spaces fill again, though with a different purpose than in the morning. The market no longer draws buyers in a steady line. Instead, small groups pause to finish short exchanges before returning home. The churchyard and nearby open areas become natural points where paths cross once more. People slow as they pass through, not out of idleness, but because the urgency of earlier hours has eased. Conversations at this time are softer and more measured. Voices drop slightly as if matching the fading light. Words focus on practical matters, what remains to be done tomorrow, whether supplies are sufficient, which tools need repair. These exchanges are brief, yet they carry a calmer cadence than during the busier parts of the day. The overall atmosphere encourages restraint rather than lively discussion. Within this setting, proximity can be managed with care. Standing within the same small group while others speak allows two individuals to share space without appearing separate from the gathering. Attention is directed toward whoever is talking, creating a shared focal point that prevents any single pair from becoming the center of notice. Presence is acknowledged through occasional glances that follow the natural flow of listening. Body language reflects the slowing rhythm of the hour. Shoulders rest lower, movements become less hurried, and hands are often folded loosely or occupied with simple tasks such as tying a cord or adjusting a cloak. These small actions provide a visible sense of purpose, even while standing still. A brief exchange of a practical item, a bundle to carry inside, a tool to return, offers another acceptable reason for momentary closeness. The fading light softens facial details, making expressions less distinct from a distance. This allows a short and gentle acknowledgement, a slight inclination of the head or a quiet softening of the eyes, to pass without drawing attention. Even so, gestures remain restrained. Any warmth appears only for a moment before returning to the composed neutrality expected in shared company. Neighbors and relatives are often present during these evening pauses. Some wait for companions to finish tasks. Others gather to walk back along the same lanes. Their presence reinforces the habit of keeping conversation general and inclusive. When several voices contribute, no single exchange stands apart. The group setting maintains the appearance of ordinary social order. The sensory atmosphere shifts as well. The sharper sounds of tools are replaced by lighter noises. The brushing of straw brooms, the closing of wooden shutters, the low murmur of people finishing their day. A faint scent of cooking fires begins to spread as hearths are prepared for the evening meal. These familiar signals encourage a gradual winding down without any abrupt change. Psychologically, the end of the working day brings a quieter state of mind. Physical fatigue reduces the impulse for extended conversation, yet familiarity gained through earlier encounters remains present. Recognition feels steady and calm rather than alert. The mind accepts shared proximity as part of the day's natural conclusion. Walking short distances toward the same direction becomes more common now. Several people may leave a communal space together, following the same narrow street before turning toward different homes. During these shared steps, speech remains minimal. A simple remark about the cooling air or the timing of tomorrow's work is enough to acknowledge presence without inviting attention. Community observation continues, though it is gentler in tone. With most tasks complete, there is less reason to watch for diligence or distraction. Still, the visibility of movement through the streets means behavior remains measured. Individuals keep an even pace and maintain respectful distance, ensuring that nothing appears unusually private. Cause and effect remains consistent with the earlier hours. Because interactions stay within group settings and practical exchanges, they are interpreted as ordinary neighbourly conduct. This interpretation allows repeated proximity to occur without stirring comment. Familiarity is sustained quietly, supported by the shared routine of closing the day. As the sky dims further, communal spaces begin to empty. Remaining conversations shorten naturally as people turn their attention toward returning home. Final nods are exchanged. A last item is handed back. Cloaks are drawn closer as the evening air cools. Each person carries the same composed demeanor that has guided behavior throughout the day. The town settles into a slower rhythm, where movement is steady but unhurried. Within this calm transition, subtle recognition persists without declaration. Presence is acknowledged, then released as paths separate. The shared spaces that once held the noise of trade now hold only the soft murmur of departing footsteps, guiding the community gently towards the quiet that follows nightfall. As the last light fades from the upper walls and rooftops, the town's movement narrows into the familiar paths that lead back towards shared homes. Doors open and close in measured intervals. Footsteps soften against packed earth and worn stone. The air cools, carrying the mingled scents of evening fires, damp wood, and the day's dust settling into stillness. The energy that filled the streets only hours earlier eases into a quieter and inward rhythm. Households gather again within confined interiors. Space is arranged for practical rest rather than privacy. Benches are cleared, tools are set aside, and simple meals are shared close together. The glow of the hearth becomes the main source of light, casting steady shadows along low ceilings and rough walls. Conversation remains calm and grounded in routine. What was finished? What remains for tomorrow? Who will rise first to begin the next day's work? Within these shared rooms, personal reflection happens quietly and without display. Any recognition carried from the day's brief encounters is held inward, shaped by the same discipline that guided behavior in public. Expressions remain composed. Hands stay occupied with small closing tasks, folding cloth, checking a strap, placing items where they can be found at dawn. These familiar actions provide a gentle structure that keeps attention steady. Family presence is close and continuous. Elders settle near the warmth of the fire. Younger members move carefully to avoid disturbing others preparing to rest. The proximity leaves little room for extended private thought, yet it also creates a sense of predictable order. Each person knows where they belong within the shared space. The routine of evening reinforces the expectation that the day's outward concerns now give way to quiet restoration. Sounds inside the home are soft and repetitive. A wooden cup is set down. Fabric shifts as someone adjusts a blanket. Low voices fade into shorter exchanges, then into silence. Outside, distant footsteps pass once or twice along the lane before disappearing. The town does not become silent all at once. It settles gradually, like embers dimming rather than extinguishing. Psychologically, the transition to the night allows the mind to slow. The careful restraint maintained throughout the day no longer requires active attention, yet it remains present as habit. Moments of recognition from shared spaces, Glances at the well, brief cooperation in the market, quiet acknowledgement during evening gatherings, rest in memory without needing interpretation. They exist as part of the steady pattern of ordinary life. Privacy remains limited even in rest. Sleeping places are arranged close together, separated perhaps by a small distance or by a hanging cloth. Because of this, thoughts are kept inward and still. Breathing evens. Posture relaxes gradually as the body releases the effort of the day. No words are needed to mark the shift from activity to rest. The change is carried by the slowing of movement and the dimming of light. Community presence continues beyond the walls in a muted form. A door closes nearby. A latch is set. Somewhere farther down the street, a final voice calls softly before fading. These small signals confirm that others are also settling, each household following a similar rhythm. The shared awareness of neighbors does not disappear at night. It becomes quieter, less immediate, yet still gently felt. Emotional restraint at this hour takes the form of calm acceptance. There is no urgency to act, no space for display. Any sense of familiarity built through the day is allowed to remain unspoken, held with patience that matches the slow pace of the evening. The expectation is not for change overnight, but for continuity. Another morning, another set of shared routines. The hearth's glow softens as fuel is allowed to burn lower. Shadows lengthen across the floor and blend into one another. People settle into their places, adjusting blankets, turning slightly to find comfort on simple bedding. The room grows quieter with each passing moment. Breaths become slower and more even. Outside, the narrow streets empty completely. The last traces of movement fade into the distance. The scent of smoke lingers lightly in the cool air. No single sound dominates. Instead, a gentle stillness spreads across the town, uninterrupted and steady. Within this calm, the day's careful gestures, brief glances, measured words, small acts of courtesy, rest without conclusion or declaration. They remain part of an ongoing rhythm shaped by shared space and patient time. As the light diminishes to a faint ember and then to darkness, the town settles fully into night, holding its quiet order until the next morning begins again. As evening settles over the town, the shared spaces grow quieter and conversations soften into the background. The small gestures of the day fade with the light, leaving only the steady rhythm of familiar routines. What was exchanged in passing, glances, brief words, quiet presence, rests gently within the memory of the streets. With doors closing and households gathering inside, the careful social world returns to stillness. Nothing dramatic remains, only the quiet order of a community where every interaction was shaped by being seen. As night deepens, the town settles into rest, and these subtle moments of connection drift quietly into the dark.